Hey Jessica, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. I'm sort of a fair weather fan of either the Eagles or the Steelers. I'm more like college football. Like I went to Penn State, so I'm a big Penn State fan.
Never heard of it. Is it a
Yeah,
small school? Yeah.
yeah. I always get mixed up. I think of 2019 as last year because nothing happened last year.
Yeah.
But
Nope.
it's like, so in 2019, my brother got married, and as a wedding gift, I got him and his wife Penn State season tickets because they both
Oh,
went there.
yeah. Great
And
gift. Yeah.
and then this season, like it got canceled because you couldn't like go to see the games. But then Penn State had like one of the worst seasons they've had in like 15 years. So I was like, thank goodness they canceled the audience so
Yeah.
that you didn't have to go and watch them lose every week. So now the tickets will roll over to next season. So hopefully when they're back, they'll do better again.
Yeah. When you have the summers off, do you get to travel a lot, or are you doing mostly stand up? And
Yeah, so over the summer I always go back to see my family in Pennsylvania for, at least a week, sometimes 2 weeks or more. And then
yeah.
I usually try to travel a little bit. I'll do stand up.
Yeah.
And then I'm hoping I'm able to travel internationally again, take a vacation, but
Oh,
we'll see if that happens this year or not.
yeah. Even just hearing that sounds so nice. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
How is working remotely going for you? Because I'm kind of going a little crazy, so I don't know how how are you doing?
It's like there's pluses and minuses to it. Like I liked working remotely for a while because it frees up my time where I can work on my own writing projects. And if I want to travel on a weekend, do stand up, I can work over Zoom. On the days when I actually have assignments, like if I have like a comedy bit or a monologue or something, I would much prefer to be in the office just because I feel like it's easier to stay on top of everything. If you need like, props or music or graphics or anything, and just, through the editing process and rehearsals, I find it much easier on days when when I personally have an assignment, I would much rather be in the office, like back in October, we started going in like a couple days a week, like a smaller staff, but like things started to open up. So we were going in a few days a week and kind of alternating days. But then when they like locked everything down, we went back to like just over Zoom. And so now it's, Ellen's there with a like small staff of like camera people and like EPs, but then everyone else is pretty much working from home right now.
Oh God. I started at UCB in New York, but you started stand up at UCB in New York, right? How was that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So my first time doing stand-up was at the UCB Theater in New York on 26th Street. Like I used to go to see the ASCAP performances there where they would have like the SNL people, and I was working at Conan at the time, and like Conan writers would come out and do improv there. I was just like, I started as an intern at Conan, then I was a producer's assistant there, but that's when I had moved to New York. And so I always wanted to try stand-up, and I wrote jokes in a notebook for probably 3 years before I got the nerve to like get on stage and try it.
Yeah.
And then it was in 2007. I remember because it was during the writers' strike, and so Conan shut down for like a week or two.
Yeah.
And I had just gone through a breakup, and like it was just there was nothing to do, and I was like feeling down, and there was no work, and I was like, you know what? I have nothing to do right now. I'm gonna finally get out and try stand up.
Yeah.
And so they had this thing called Gut Bucket at the UCB Theater, and you would go at like midnight on a Saturday and put your name in a bucket, and then you'd like go eat at McDonald's around the corner and walk back and see if you got like your name pulled, and then the show would start at like 1 a.m. or something.
I used to intern on Saturday nights there, so I'm having all these like flashbacks. I was like, yep, I was there.
And Pete Holmes was the open mic host. So like the first time I ever did stand up, Pete Holmes was like the open mic host. And I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. Like some people like to have their friends and family there to support. And then I'm like, some people are like me. I was like, I want to go try this anonymously, and if I suck, I'm never gonna tell anyone I was there.
Yep.
So so I went, and my name got pulled, and you go up and you do like 5 minutes of stand up, and I remember it went like pretty well. Like there was maybe one joke I had that didn't work, but for the 5 minutes, I got laughs, and there was like a decent crowd there that night because UCB was like, it was like a cool thing to do in New York. Like everybody in the comedy industry and like everyone, who heard about it, like any show that they had, any time of the night, there'd be people there. So we had a good crowd, and the show went really well, and I felt like really good about it. I was like, I did it, I killed it. And then I thought, oh, I can do this. And so next week after that, I signed up for a mic at a place called Maui Taco. I don't even know if it's still there.
Ooh.
It's by Penn Station on 34th Street.
Oh God.
It's like this Mexican restaurant, and they have stairs going like down in the basement. They had a comedy show down there. And I, coming off of my big debut, I was like, oh, I'm good. And I went up there and just bombed for 10 minutes of silence. It just sucked. Oh, it was bad.
I mean, the best place to do stand-up is a taco restaurant. So
yes, exactly. And I remember it because there was a small audience when the mic started, and it was all exchange students from England. There was maybe like 8 of them, and they were sitting there, and like the other comics went up, and like the other comics, I remember at least 3 of them going up and not doing great. Like they didn't get many laughs or anything.
Yeah.
And then the host went up and decided to do like 20 minutes. Like just, I think his mic didn't often have an audience, and because there were people there, he did like 20 minutes. And then by the time he was done, the whole audience was like, okay, we're done. And they left. So this is my first time at a mic, and I was like, oh, the audience left. That probably means the mic's over. And they're like, no, the comics are still here. So then I had to go up with no audience in front of like 4 comics who had just not done well and just tell jokes to this silent room.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and like comics never laugh, so it's like such a hard thing to just go.
I know, it's so rough. I try to be a good laugher when I'm at mics, like even to this day. Like I won't force it or give like pity laughs.
Yeah.
But like I always try to like, I'm there to have fun. Like if people tell a good joke, like I laugh. But it's crazy how many comics will go to open mics and they just sit there and be like, I can't laugh for anyone else, or it hurts me, basically.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And what I love about your stand-up too, I think you're such a smart writer.
Thank you. I think so too.
Like that. Yeah. You're like, yes. But your jokes are always just so well written. And
yeah, I mean, there's different styles with different people. There's people that are like storytellers. There's people that like being, animated and doing characters.
Yeah.
I appreciate it because I definitely, try to write in a smart way. And that's just always the comedy that like I was drawn to. Like I like punchlines. Like I kind of, it's not that there's no comics that I like, that don't do punchlines, but like, it's like, I want to hear a joke. I don't, I'm not really drawn to like storyteller comics. Like the ones I liked growing up, like I watched comedy just all of my like teens and high school years. It was all I watched. Jim Gaffigan I liked a lot. Mitch Hedberg I liked a lot. Those were probably like my 2 favorites. And like when I first started, that was like between Jim Gaffigan and Mitch Hedberg, they were probably the biggest influence on my like early writing style. And then like working at Conan, the writers there were brilliant, and it wasn't like stand-up that they were doing, but it was really like sharp comedy. So I felt like I absorbed a lot of that. And then I liked SNL growing up. I'm like a big Norm MacDonald fan also. I think he has great punchlines and smart jokes, and then he also has great like anti-jokes and just sort of stories that twist but in like a smart way where there is like a punchline to it. So that's just like what I've been that was like the biggest influence on me. So I feel like that's what I've been drawn to.
Yeah. Did you ever get to meet Norm at Conan or at any of the shows you've worked on?
Yes. Okay. So this is a great question because I don't think I've told this story on a podcast before. So Norm was on Conan a lot, and he was like our favorite guest. Like he's so funny. All of his Conan appearances are legendary. Like you can go on YouTube and just go down a rabbit hole of watching Norm MacDonald on Conan. But he would always like run late for his appearances.
Yeah.
And he would like the segment producers. So when I was at Conan, I was a segment producer's assistant.
Yeah.
And so they do pre-interviews with the guest and handle like the guest interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And most guests will schedule like a pre-interview for like a half hour, like the day before the show. And they'll call the producer and go through stories or whatever jokes they have. Yeah. And then that will be kind of shaped into the segment. Mm-hmm. With Norm, he would just, because he had our producer's number, he would just call randomly like 15 times at different points in the week leading up to his appearance with different stories and different pitches. And, he'd run them by the producer. And then when he actually got out there, none of that stuff was used. And he would just do his Norm thing and just, make fun of the first guest or whatever. But the one time he was running late and it was like getting closer and closer to showtime. And he wasn't there, and we had sent a car to pick him up. This was after the show moved to LA. Okay. And me and the talent coordinator, we keep trying to get a hold of him. The talent coordinator is like we have Norm's number. We keep calling him. and she said, the driver is there. The driver is banging on the door. And then this was like a half hour before. Then it's like 15 minutes before. Then it's like 10 minutes before. And she said, the driver has been knocking on the door. And finally I get through and he goes, hello? And I go, Norm, this is Adam at Conan. Like, you're supposed to be here soon. He goes, yeah, I'm coming. I was taking a nap first. And we go, okay, well, it's like 10 minutes before the show starts. You know, how far away are you? There's a driver there for you. And he goes, I got to tell you, I've been trying to take a nap, but I can't sleep because someone in my neighborhood's hammering. And I go, Norm, that's the driver at your door, knocking on the door.
Oh my God, that's incredible. He's like my favorite comic. So
he's hilarious. Yeah, everything he does is just, he's one that what I love about him, he's a comic who I think he's one of the funniest people alive, and he can do anything. He can do setup, like punchline kind of jokes. He can do impressions. Like if you look at his old like SNL, like the Bob Dole or the Turd Ferguson, you know, like he could do that. He can do like storytelling. If you've read his book, it's hilarious. Like there's very few comics that have, you know, all of those talents down. It's usually they gravitate towards one, but yeah, I think Norm is just brilliant.
Oh, like what you were saying too, when I started comedy, I just thought you were funny. I didn't realize like there were specific writers versus performers. Like, is there one, because you're a great writer and performer, is there one you had to work at more, or were you just always naturally?
Definitely performing is something that I have to work at more. And I feel like that's still a thing that I have to, because like I have stage presence in terms of like confidence in delivering jokes. I'm not like a big personality on stage. And there's a lot of comics, I think, that you know, it's weird. As a writerly comic, there's always this instinct to like, you know, hate on the comics that are very like big and animated, because it gets laughs and it wins audiences over very quickly. But as a writer comic, you're always sitting there and you're like, what are they laughing at? There's no joke. He's just yelling things and making faces, you know. But audiences like that, you know. There's people, you know, like Robin Williams or Jim Carrey, or people that are, you know, hilarious but are just, you know, big personalities. But I came from like a writing background. And like, you know, I was saying, like, if you watch like Mitch Hedberg or you know, Jim Gaffigan has some act outs and does voices, but you know, I like the more like delivery based stand-up comedy. So I had to work much more on like, you know, just having stage presence more so than writing, which, you know, I work at, but it came more naturally to me. And I had to get rid of like bad habits when I started like pacing. You know, that's something I did that when I first started, you know, where you walk back and forth across the stage.
Done that a lot. Yeah.
And now I found, you know, like I'm most comfortable when I get up. What's been hard about the pandemic is like you don't get up regularly. And I feel like I'm much more confident on stage, and I can even kind of riff and talk to the audience if I'm going up, you know, multiple nights a week. If I go up once every 3 weeks, it's like when you get up there, no matter how many times you've done it, if you take like 3 weeks off, you feel rusty and you're like, oh, I got to be out here doing this more often.
My first time like just doing stand-up after, well, not after the pandemic, but like after I got here and like things are more open here, I was like, these jokes are gonna kill, and all bombed. I was like, oh God, I feel like it's my first time doing it again. But
I always have like I call them like canary in the coal mine jokes, where like I'm trying, you know, if there's a crowd that's difficult, you know, or not getting laughs, I always wonder whether it's like me or the audience. So then you like break out like the old jokes that like always kill. And if that one doesn't go over, you're like, oh, this, you know, there's no saving it. It's just everything's done if this joke dies. But you know, it's different because like, you know, I don't like to blame the audience. You know, that's like it's a bad instinct in comedy, but at the same time, there are audiences that, you know, some audiences love clean, sharp humor. And then if a comic comes up and is dirty, they're put off by that. Whereas, you know, other audiences just love dirty humor, and, you know, that gets the biggest laugh. And then if you go up and try to do something clean, or if you're lower energy than the comic, you know, they're not feeling you. And, you know, definitely part of being on stage is, you know, in all comics, regardless, you have to kind of work off that energy no matter what the audience is. But at the end of the day, there are always, you know, audiences and clubs and even parts of the country that gravitate towards different styles, you know. So it's like, you kind of have to read the audience, but you sometimes, sometimes you blame them and it's
Yeah.
their fault.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember watching Conan call your parents like back in the day, and it was like one of
Yeah.
the funniest things. Like,
Yep.
how did they react to that at all?
So yeah, my Conan did this bit where he was calling all the staff members' parents to get their
Yeah.
opinion on the show, basically. And when he called my parents at home, they weren't home, and their answering machine rang like 20 times before the recording picked up. And he's sitting there, and he left a message, which my mom still has saved on tape somewhere,
Yeah.
of Conan lecturing them on how you can adjust the settings on how many times your answering machine rings. And he goes, maybe you could set it to like 4 or 5 instead of 50. So
So
they
fun.
love that he called. And then what didn't make it into the show is like that part was funny. And then when he didn't get through to them at their landline, he called them on their cell phone, because I gave him their cell phone. I was like, maybe we can reach them here. And they were out eating at a restaurant in Allentown called the Chicken Lounge.
Ooh.
And I remember, because I called the number, and I'm sitting at my desk, and my mom picks up and she goes, "Hi, Adam." And I go, "Mom, there's somebody that wants to talk to you." And Conan takes the phone and he goes, "Mrs. Yenser, it's Conan O'Brien." And she screams, she goes, "It is not." And then he goes, "It is. I want to talk to you." And she goes, hold on, I have to get outside." And she runs outside. And you just hear this all over the phone. And my dad came out, and Conan talked to them for like, I don't know, probably 5 minutes or more, just
Yeah.
kind of talking to them about the show, what they thought of the show. He was great to work for.
Oh.
And I grew up loving him, and my parents loved him. So they were thrilled when he called. That was like, yeah, it was a lot of fun for them.
Oh. You're one of the only people I know who went from late night to daytime too. And I think that's a pretty hard, I mean, just from my opinion, a hard thing to
Yeah.
do.
I think from my opinion, it was a hard thing to do as well.
Yeah, it was just like, how did you, I mean, even like just writing a packet, I feel like would be so hard going from late night to daytime. Like, how did you
Well,
do it?
so it's interesting that's very like observant, because that was hard. So I worked at Conan for 6 years. I wanted to get into writing. I started as an intern there, then I became the receptionist, then I became the segment producer's assistant. But I always wanted to get into writing.
Yeah.
And so when I moved out with Conan's show to LA and did the Tonight Show, and then moved to the TBS show. And a writing job opened at Conan, and I applied to it, but I didn't get that. And writing jobs like hardly ever open there, because it's a great place to write. And so, people stay there forever. So I was like, it's going to be another 6 years before another writing job opens. So I started putting out, writing samples elsewhere. I started looking, at different places, sent some submissions out. And Ellen and Conan were both on the Warner Brothers lot.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine at Conan heard about the job opening at Ellen, and Ellen was like a comic that I respect. And like when I would catch her show, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't a show that I was like tuning into every day or like knew inside and out. And so, they said they were taking writing submissions, and I had been freelancing for Weekend Update. So they've like, I don't know if they still do it, but they used to have a thing where you could freelance for Weekend Update and send in like topical jokes every week. So I had been doing that. So I just sent in to the Ellen producers like a packet of like late night monologue, like Weekend Update style jokes.
Yeah.
And then like a few weeks later, their producer called me and said, "Hey, this is the Ellen show. We got your jokes and we really like them, but they're not like Ellen's style at all.
Yeah.
If we send you like 3 examples of her monologues, can you resubmit in her style?" And so they sent me, some scripts from 3 previous monologues she had done that they liked. And over the course of like a weekend, I inundated myself with like every Ellen clip I could find. I watched her specials. I watched on YouTube like every clip from the Ellen show that I could find.
Yeah.
Kind of trying to just like absorb her style and stuff. And then I resubmitted with those monologue submissions and some comedy bit ideas. And they liked them and set up an interview, and I got hired there. And it was great and it was awesome. But what you were saying about moving from late night, it's such a hard learning curve coming from both late night, just because of the tone. Like I'm not like a dirty comedian, but I like edgy and like bizarre kind of humor and like the absurdist stuff you do on late night.
Yeah.
And, Ellen is, it's a daytime show, so the audience is different. So it was hard to get the tone down. And also what's different is like most late night shows now, each host has their own personality, but the monologue jokes are like a headline and then a punchline, a headline and then a punchline. And then the comedy acts are like, they're like sort of a ringleader in a circus where there's like craziness going on around them and they're interacting with characters, but they're kind of the straight man for most of it.
Yeah.
But like with Ellen, the monologues are like stories from her life or like her perspective on what's going on or like, you know, her observation. So everything has to, when you're writing for it, has to sound like it's like her.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the first like year I was there, like every writing contracts start as 13-week cycles. So it's like every 13 weeks you're up for renewal. And every 13 weeks for my first year there, I thought I was going to get fired. Just every time I was like, I didn't write enough good stuff this week. They didn't like anything.
It's such a high pressure to environment every
Yeah.
day, and yeah, it's a lot.
And then it was like, you know, probably 3/4 of the way through my first year, the head writer there at the time, Kevin Lehman, was like really supportive of me. He helped me kind of, you know, get her voice down and was really, you know, encouraging. And yeah, so about 3/4 of my way through my first year, I felt like I started to get it. And then it wasn't until like my second full year there where I really sort of felt comfortable writing in her voice.
Yeah. Do you have any tips on how, because I feel like that's what I always struggle with too, is like getting the voice down. Like people are
Yeah.
always like, you sound like you, like you're just writing
Yep.
your punchlines. Like, do you have any tips on how to get better at that, or just practice? Or
I mean, practice is the best thing, but like I said, you know, what I did when I was putting together the submission, you know, whoever you're writing for, just like inundate yourself. If they're, you know, if they host a show, also look up their stand-up specials. Watch every clip from their show that you can. If they've acted in movies, like look up, you know, what they're like try to get inside their head, and see, you know, what, you know, not just, you know, what jokes they've told on the show, but like who they are as a person, you know, to get
yeah,
that kind of their perspective down. And when you're kind of out and about in your, like, I find it hard sometimes to just sit down and come up with ideas. So it's more like when you're out, you know, in a conversation or in the day, you observe something, you're like, oh, I could work this into a bit.
yeah,
I always try to, like, if you're someone who does write for yourself and does stand up or has, you know, an interest in writing for different styles, like as soon as an idea hits me, like try to place it like, oh, this is something that I would do in stand up, or, you know, oh, this is something Ellen would do. Like as soon as an idea hits, like people have asked me, you know, is it hard? Like, do you
yeah,
feel like you give your best material to the show? Or do you feel like, you know, if you come up with a good idea, do you want to save it for yourself? That's rarely a problem for me
yeah,
because I feel like just tone and voice wise, it's like when a comedy idea hits, it's very clear to me instantly whether this is for my stand up or, oh, this is something that would work in Ellen's voice on the show.
yeah. Oh, that's such good advice. You were a philosophy major, right? No,
Yeah.
sorry.
I double major. So I have a major in film and video, which is where I learned like screenwriting and stuff. And
Oh,
then
awesome.
I double majored in philosophy as well.
Yeah, I was like, I feel like you can tell.
It's interesting you said that because philosophy is actually pretty common among like comedians. I think it was in Steve Martin's book.
Yeah,
He mentions that. And I know Stephen Colbert, I think, has talked about this because he said it kind of gives you a sense of like illogical logic and sort of arguing absurd points of view. Like another popular one is like law students, which is always kind of related to like people who start out in philosophy. Sometimes
yeah.
will go for their masters. Like Greg Giraldo went to Harvard Law. Mike Sweeney, who was like the head writer at Conan for years, started out as a lawyer. And I just recently read there's a biography of Greg Giraldo by Matt Balaker that came out recently.
Ooh.
And he talks about that in there, how like Greg Giraldo's style of comedy, it was like he could argue like any point of view through humor. And it's like a lot of that comes from philosophy and logic and learning debate and stuff like that. Like it's very applicable to comedy writing.
Yeah, I never actually put two and two together, but I'm like, yeah, there are actually like the Lucas brothers too were lawyers.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. What so I love your field pieces too. I loved I watched I mean Kevin the Cashier is amazing, but I also love the LA the Safari Guide.
Oh yeah.
That's probably one of my favorite ones. Like how did that come about?
That one was so much fun to shoot. Like if any of your listeners don't know, basically we set up an LA, like there's all these like celebrity home tours and stuff in LA and these bus tours you can take. So we set up one called the LA Wildlife Tour, where it was like a tour van and we drive around Los Angeles looking for wildlife just in the city. And so we had this van painted with like California wildlife, like bears and bobcats and stuff. And then we set it up like it was a real tour, and we got tourists that got in, and then I just drove them around basically looking for like squirrels and raccoons and domestic dogs, and we didn't see anything. But we had we always have to like book people for this stuff, like as if it's, you know, like a tour. Like our human interest department is like amazing, and our production assistants who like help coordinate all this craziness, and I just show up and do my thing. But we had a group of like 10 people on this tour, and they had a whole other tour group lined up because we were sure no one would put up with this for that long. We're gonna have to cut. These people are gonna get angry. And we never had to go to the second group. We literally from like started at 5 p.m. and for like 2 hours as it got dark out, I drove these people around like Sherman Oaks and downtown LA and looked under bridges at pigeons and stuff. And like, and they would, the greatest thing is like when I get off the van for a moment or two and we have microphones so you can hear them like talking to each other about me. And it's so funny. Yeah.
I love too when there was like a dog, like this little tiny dog, and they were like not friendly, and you were like, everyone back up.
Yeah.
So funny. Are you sure you haven't done improv? I don't know. I mean, it's pretty
I've never done improv. Yeah, I mean that there's a lot of improv in the Kevin the Cashier bits and those, but yeah, I've never done like long or short form improv like in a theater.
Yeah, I would laugh so hard doing the Kevin the Cashier.
Yeah, there's been, you know, they don't make it into the like final cut often, but there's two that actually made it into the final cut where you can actually see me start to break. There was when I worked at Michael's, there was this lady who wanted to return like yarn.
Yeah.
And she took it, like it had like a tube like holder, and then it had this very like phallic wrapped like yarn.
Yeah.
And they're taking out looking at for the like barcode, and then I said I have to put it back in, like hold this part, and she held like the receptacle, and I was just trying to jam the other thing back in, and I almost started laughing. And then the other one was at PetSmart. I was showing people pictures of my pets on my phone.
Yeah.
They were all like double entendres. I was like, do you want to see my lizard? Do you want to see my snake? Do you want to see my weasel? Do you want to see my hog? And when I said, do you want to see my hog, like you could see it like by the corners of my mouth. It was difficult to keep my composure during that.
No, you're so good at them. Like, was there a favorite one that you had? I know you've done so many now, but
it wasn't I don't think it was branded as a Kevin the Cashier, but we did like an integration with Scotch tape or something where I did gift wrapping at Michael's. The gift wrapping at Michael's is one of my favorites. Cut Restaurant, we did this like really fancy restaurant in LA where I was a sommelier and was like bringing around wine and drinks to people. That one was really good. And then there's also one that I worked at a Chevy dealership in Chicago actually. And that one, those three are probably my favorites.
Oh my God. No, do you like doing that type of stuff? Because I love canceled news too, what you do now. Like, do you like doing those more than like writing monologue jokes? Or
I love canceled news because like I am like, you know, one of the few more conservative leaning people in the entertainment industry, and there's not a lot of outlets for like you know, like topical jokes from kind of that perspective. I don't do all politics on that show, but when there is political stories, I you know, I have a different perspective than kind of what is on most of the, you know, network comedy shows. So I love doing that because it's my own voice. But you know, I like, you know, writing for Ellen, and it's a great place, you know, for me to be able to, you know, put that style of comedy out there as well. And the Kevin the Cashier bits, you know, they're fun because it's not something that I ever saw myself doing. Like I never saw myself as like a prank comedian or like a hidden camera comedian, but it wound up being something that fit my style very well because you know, everyone always says it's because I'm good at like, you know, I mentioned I break, but for the most part, I'm good at keeping a straight face. Yeah. And it always like surprises me how if you say something to someone in just a like monotone, like, and you act like it's like a normal thing, they'll go along with it no matter how crazy it is, you know? So I enjoy that. I really like also every year at the holidays when Ellen does her 12 days of giveaways, I go out and try to find people selling their gifts for money online.
Investigate.
I like kind of the idea of like being like a correspondent. Like I've never liked it acting. Like I don't like doing characters, but but I like kind of being, myself, and like, being the sort of fake investigative reporter kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like canceled news and stand up is, that's really fun for me, because it's like that thing where it's like, it's your material, you're delivering it, you're in control of everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's like what feeds you as a like, that's the fun part of it, is like, this is my joke and I'm telling it, and
Yeah.
it is what it is, kind of. Yeah.
And did I hear you got to work with Robert Smigel once when you were at Conan or something with?
Yeah, so I don't know Robert well, but I worked with him on Triumph shoots when he
Cool.
was at Conan. Robert Smigel is like a hero of mine in like comedy writing. He's had his hand in so many things, and like he's so brilliantly funny. And I also think he did this industry right, where his name means something. Like, most people know of Robert Smigel's name.
Yeah.
Most people have seen, like the Saturday TV Funhouse on SNL. Most people know Triumph the Insult Comic Dog. But if he walks down the street, like, most people don't recognize him. It's like, to have that, like, your name mean something in comedy, but to not be like a celebrity yourself. Like, I love his comedy, and I think he's, had such a smart and successful career. But yeah, it was really cool to see him. I did the Triumph Goes to Chinatown shoot. I remember I was with on. And it's funny because it's like, I run into this problem sometimes on Kevin the Cashier, and like, especially those investigative shoots that we do sometimes.
Yeah.
Because like Robert Smigel would always do this, where it's like, before you go on those like man on the street shoots, you have to like clear certain areas where you can shoot. Like, especially in LA and New York, you need shooting permits, and then if you're going in stores or something, you need to clear it.
Mhm.
But then, like, as a comedian, or like, as when Robert's doing Triumph, it's just whatever happens, he goes.
Yeah.
And the field producer is always there, go, no, we can't go in there. And it's like, no, we're going in there, and we'll worry about it later. It's
Yeah.
just like, you have to go to where the comedy is. And it's funny, years later, I don't think this bit aired on Ellen. I think it was for the web, but they have this thing called CatCon in LA, where it's like crazy cat people. And
You
I
don't
was
go?
there.
You don't that's not your thing? It's not
Well,
your
I
thing?
was
No.
there. This was years later. I was shooting a bit for Ellen, like as a correspondent at CatCon, and Robert Smigel was there doing Triumph as a bit for Conan, and I saw him there again, and I was like, yeah. So, yeah, it was fun to run into him again. Like I said, I don't know him well, but I worked with him a few times, and
So cool.
he's a great guy, and he's such a just brilliant comedy writer.
Oh, was it cool to go back to Conan too? Because I know you did a set there, which I loved your set too.
Oh yeah, that was such a good feeling to be able to go back and do stand up. That was 2 years after I left. I think I came back to do like a stand up set on Conan, and yeah, it felt like coming home. It felt like
Oh,
seeing family again. Just like being able to be backstage right before I walked out there. And I got to hang out at the studio for a while afterwards, and talk to my old bosses, the segment producers, and see
yeah.
people that I worked with there. Yeah, it's just like Conan is it's weird. I love having been able to work at Ellen, and I love the other writers there, and it's a great place to work. But Conan, from what we went through moving out to LA from New York, and then the whole drama with Jay Leno and the Tonight Show, and then moving to TBS, it felt like Conan always described it as like a pirate ship. Like, it just felt like a family, and it felt like we could, it was just, even though I wasn't even like a creative role on the show, just being a part of that environment, I felt so close to those people, and it's like I admired them when I was a kid growing up watching Conan.
Yeah.
And then to be able to get like work with them and move around them, there's such a great group of people to work with. Yeah.
Weren't people like not protesting, but people were like outside?
There was a rally outside the studio when it was raining in Los Angeles. No one in Los Angeles goes outside when it rains.
Yeah.
And we came out, and there was like the whole Team Coco thing.
Yeah.
And I have pictures of this. There was a day we were at Universal Studios lot, is where the Tonight Show with Conan taped.
Yeah.
And we walked outside because the building was like this new building they built for the Conan Tonight Show, because it's, it had like a rooftop, like, because it was, the Tonight Show, we're going to be there forever.
Yeah.
And so we went out on the roof, and I have a picture of me standing next to Conan and the head writer, and they're holding a banner down over the wall of like the Team Coco artwork. And there's just like a sea of people holding up, I'm with Coco signs, and they're in rain slickers and like
Yeah.
hats, and it's pouring. And they had La Bamba go out in like a Pope mobile kind of thing where he was like protected under glass and
Yeah.
like waiting for the people in the crowd. And yeah, just the support from like the support from the fans, when all that was going down was just like it's weird because it's one of those things where when you look back at it, like, you're losing a show. We were all going to be out of work. It's this thing. We moved across the country for this
Yeah.
job, and it's a show that we all love. And it's like, it's going away and it feels unfair. But like, when I look back on it, it was like such a fun, like, it's like a positive memory. It was such a fun time to see all of that energy from the fans and how much they loved the show. And it was just such like an exciting thing to be a part of. And those last few shows, there were so many like funny bits that came out of it. Like, they did a bit where they were like trying to waste NBC's money before they left. So they introduced the Bugatti Veyron mouse, and it was like a $200,000 sports car dressed up like a mouse. That we had to pay the rental cost for every day. And then Norm came on in one of those final days at the Tonight Show, and he did a bit where he said, this is I don't know if it was it was the second time I think he was on the Tonight Show, but he said, I forgot to bring this the first time I was here, but I got you this gift basket for getting the Tonight Show, and I have this card I want to read. And he starts reading this card, and he goes, "Dear Conan, congratulations on becoming the permanent host of the Tonight Show. That's something they can never take away from you."
Perfect. Yeah.
It was so brilliant. And then like Neil Young played on the last show, and we all were like sitting in the studio watching Neil Young play. And I remember when we left New York, when we left the last late night show, the White Stripes were our final guest. And we were all watching the White Stripes there. And then that turned out to be like the last performance they ever did before they broke up. So it's like we got to see like the White Stripes' last performance on Conan. And they did a version of We Are Gonna Be Friends. It was like different than their studio version. It was really cool. Yeah.
I feel like you need to write a book too. I'm like, just tell me everything.
Someday.
So cool. Yeah. Oh, is there anything you're working on now too? Because I mean, you're pretty busy with the show full time, doing stand up, doing canceled news and everything. Yeah. Is there anything else you're working on?
It's like you named it all, and it just I feel like I'm doing a lot. Yeah. So I'm writing for Ellen right now. I've just started getting back on the road for stand up gigs. Yeah. The last few weekends I was in Tennessee, Oregon, and Colorado, and then coming up, I have a show called The Canceled News on YouTube, which is sort of like a conservative leaning weekend update that I do every week. And then I actually have I haven't announced this anywhere yet. I don't know if I'm allowed to announce it or not, but I'm doing I'm taping a half-hour special for what's it called? Dry Bar Comedy.
Oh, awesome.
They do like kind of clean comedy online. They have their own website, and then they share a lot of their clips on social media. So I'm taping a half-hour segment for them in Provo, Utah on May 21st. I think that's coming up. So yeah, I have a lot of different, projects.
Jesus. How are you doing all of I'm doing one thing and I'm tired. I'm like,
yeah. Well, here's the thing. So this coming week is our spring break like hiatus at Ellen.
Yeah.
And it's like I just need to get caught up on like I have a pile of bills that like I have the money, I just don't have the time to fill them out. Yeah. And then I have I haven't done my taxes yet. My car isn't getting serviced now because I haven't taken it. It's just this week where I have to get caught up on everything that I've been putting off as I've been working on all this stuff for the last few weeks.
God, well, you're doing so much. I'm so impressed. Like, thank you for everything too. You're one of my favorite comedians.
Oh, thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you for having me. This was great. You're a great podcast host. I feel like you got stories out of me that other people haven't, heard before. So that's good.
Oh, thanks. I don't know if that's true, but I'll take it. But
yeah.